My name is Eugenia Diaz. I'm a designer and an artist, and I'm going to tell you the story of my tiny house garden journey. I took the most important decision of my life in 2019. I left my life in the city and moved into a camper van to spend more time closer to nature. At the end of 2020, I finally moved to the countryside, to a little village with less than 30 inhabitants, in the mountains of Portugal. And so the journey began. Once we arrived to the land with our camper van, we started working on it. The land is divided by two parts, the top area, which is around 350 square meters, and the one we chose to live at while we work in the bigger part during the next years. The first thing that needed to be done was to clear all the bushes and dead branches that accumulated over the years. Once that work was finished, the next step was to start our vegetable garden. With the idea to live a more self-sufficient life, growing our food seemed to be the top priority in that journey. We made 4 raised beds, and since the soil we found was depleted in nutrients, we added nourished soil on top of the existing dry clay soil. We also covered as much ground as possible on the rest of this part of the land to retain all the water we could. When we arrived, we didn't have running water or electricity, so maximizing the use of water when watering the garden was key. We started all the garden from organic heirloom seeds and follow a polyculture gardening approach that tries to imitate nature. The goal was to create many layers in height, no uniformity with the distances between plants, and many different varieties existing together in one place. We also grew poreros for the first time. We dig a trench and fill it with dry hay we cut from the land that same week. This helped us in many ways, but mainly retaining more water when watering the poreros. The first months were very challenging. We arrived to the land in September, on a very hot and dry climate, that suddenly turned into a very cold and rainy winter, which was great for the garden, because I pretty much didn't have to water it, but also meant living inside a humid and cold camper van. So the next months, we watched the garden grow while we continue working on building our future off-grid home. Around the new year, we had many frosts, and so many plants suffered a hiccup, but the garden was still productive and abundant. This was also the perfect time for the garlic and onions to grow, which we harvested in the following months and were able to preserve for the rest of the year. Once spring arrived, we continued working on expanding the garden and the greenery in the outdoor area. We made a corridor of plants that didn't need much water to thrive and attracted pollinators for the summer garden. So we planted the mix of Mexican feathergrass, lavenders, and Felicia daisies. We then continue expanding the garden with another 4 beds. Only this time the soil was a bit more wet to work on. It was still very hard work because some areas were more compacted than others.
Right now there is no way to introduce this.
But with patience and time, the garden beds were almost ready for the summer garden. Later on, we found compost from a local farm and added it to all the garden beds right before transplanting all the seedlings for the summer garden. In the area close to the fence, we planted sunflowers, along the corn, beans and squashes, a combination called the Three Sisters. The corn stalks created a trellis for beans to climb. The beans fixed nitrogen to the soil, which kept the corn plants healthy, and the squashes contributed by shading the ground with their broad leaves, preventing weeds from growing and retaining water in the soil. The sunflowers planted around the edge of the garden created a natural fence protecting other plants from wind and attracting pollinators. In the rest of the garden, we grew many varieties of vegetables: tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, zucchini, and leafy greens, to name a few. I made sure to always have herbs and flowers close to the vegetable plants to help attract pollinators and maintain a good balance of beneficial insects. This was all experimental. We mix local seeds from our neighbors along with a lot of new organic ones. For fruits, we planted watermelons, melons and physalis, all from seeds. The physalis is a perennial plant that will keep giving us fruit year after year, without having to plant a new one. It has been really productive, and I really love its radiant and tasty orange fruits, which are great snacks when walking by the garden. The goal we had in this part of the land was to experiment, designing and creating a very productive vegetable garden that was integrated into the landscape design to enjoy it all year long. Working with colors, lines, layers and textures was key to add depth into the design, which we will later replicate but in a much bigger scale in the other side of our land. Looking further in the future and working little by little to be more in balance with planet Earth and be 99% self-sufficient in terms of food, we went ahead and planted more than 15 trees. In this small part of the land, we now have 4 olive trees, a lemon, orange, pear, plum, apple, pomegranate, banana, avocado, and some native species, along with blackberry, raspberry, and blueberry bushes. But the journey up to this point hasn't been an easy one. This past winter, 3 trees died. The heavy rains mixed with a very heavy clay soil rotted their roots. This, of course, has been a lesson we have learned the hard way, but thanks to it, we have already studied alternatives to plant more than 200 trees in the rest of the land during the next years. Overall, I will say this past year we have successfully moved towards the direction of a different way of living in balance with planet Earth. We are now growing most of our food, producing 100% of our electricity with renewable energies, have maximized the use of water, were able to restore the land and create new life. We are now making our own compost with our organic waste, plus built our own home debt-free. All of this in just 1 year. And I believe that the reason why we have successfully accomplished all of this is because we were running our own race, and we were focused on what we could do day by day. Week after week, living a life from the point of view of our own truth. So today, I hope I was able to bring some light into your day and to inspire you to live a life that feels true to yourself. Because there is no one else in creation like you, and what you have come to do and what you have to offer is like no other.